And we are live. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Miss Juniper, how are we doing this evening?
Doing well. Happy to be back.
Yes, that's true. You are in a short handful of folks that are repeat guests at this point. So I was definitely glad to jump in and get a mother's perspective on the subject we're going to dig into tonight. But we are also joined by a special guest. So, special guest, would you like to make an introduction?
Hello, this is Mr. Juniper, the husband behind the Juniper persona. Glad to be on today and be able to talk about this stuff.
Yes, absolutely. So it's one of the things that sort of gets taken for granted in these circles that we're going to read a lot. And then primarily the circles that I run in online, self selection and so on, they tend to be men and they tend to be men of a certain makeup. And so it's very easy to silo yourself. And so I was excited to get not only a mother's perspective, but then potentially also go on different paths that I'm unaware of and don't see too often. So the big thrust this evening, though, is with me running in circles with men and wanting to see men reading and getting involved in that. Where do you guys, as parents, where do you see the emphases that should be focused on with young men and with reading? And when I say, I'm sorry, just real quick, when I say young men, I mean all the way from the primary reading age of 5, 6, all the way up, say 20ish or so, as they
Well,
start
I'll
to leave the house.
probably start with me since I'm doing most of the reading to the little kids.
Yes.
Um, so phonics is essential. Unfortunately, it seems that a lot of young men and young women don't read very much because they can't actually read at all. Um, and part of that is because they aren't taught phonics in school.
So you're
And
talking
part
the
of
literal act of reading,
like the
not
active
abstraction
reading,
right
the
now.
physical
Yeah.
active reading, like a lot of kids really struggle because they are taught basically a form of advanced guessing in schools, where they are given books with pictures and they're taught some basic sounds. And then they're supposed to infer what the text is saying based off of the picture that's provided or like context clues. But they never actually get formal instruction in like different phonemes. So when they stop being given picture books, they can't actually decode more advanced texts. So I think essential for really, really young ages is learning phonics, practicing sight words, and actually mastering the physical act of like scanning text and reading. And then along with that, being exposed to at a young age a wide vocabulary. And some of that comes from your parents reading. Some of that comes from parents speaking to their kids and just being exposed to a lot of different people talking all the time. We did a lot of poetry memorization when the kids were little.
Mhm.
Well, it was when the older kids were little. And just like making sure whatever media you have on in the house is just like not slop. You've My husband's been kind of the driving force behind the anti-slop crusade in the household because it kind of takes two to police the slide into YouTube. So that's been big for you.
Yeah, so really, as a husband, obviously, Juniper, she's a lot more involved in the actual, like going through all the curriculums, picking the exact titles and things. And I try and stay involved in really getting to what is the content of the reading and getting back to the purpose of education is, for lack of a charitable term, indoctrination. Like you are transmitting values. And so at each stage, not only do you need the actual like nuts and bolts, you need to know how to read, but what are the stories and values that is being exposed to children and that you're kind of suffusing your life with, because that will inform how um, how children come to view the world, really from a foundational aspect. And I know for me, when I was a young boy, I was very into like hero stories. I was a big fan of fantasy. Later in the teen years, science fiction. Um, and I think it is important to encourage and push to kind of move to the next level of intellectual capacity in that. I think there's kind of an incentive now to kind of stay comfortable, but there really are those peaks. Not that there isn't goodness at them, but transitioning from young boys fiction to say young men's fiction are really just the classic works, or not even, I don't think everyone needs to read all the classics or anything like that, but to just go into that adult world of literature or even adult world of fantasy in some way where it's written towards your appropriate level. And I think especially for young boys, things like the hero's narrative and having proper narratives of how you should act, how you should engage with the world. Like I said, when it comes to media, going on YouTube to make sure, like, is this just pure slop entertainment that's passive, or is there at least some form of story arc, some form of message behind it that's edifying in a way and engaging?
You've
Is
also
what I
been,
watch for.
yeah, well, and you've also been big about making sure that there's at least some sort of artistic value also in a lot of what the kids are exposed to. So like the
Now,
narrative arc being
dig
part
into
of it.
that one. Dig into the artistic value, because there's some things I'd like to circle back to, but this one's a little bit more abstract, and I think it could get lost in the conversation.
Yeah. And
When
so
you're
for
saying
me,
artistic value, what does that mean?
So for me, I would say Juniper is much more the actual like artisan crafting, creating. My study was actually in philosophy, art history, more the intellectual aspect of the arts. And for me, it's very important to understand art as a means of communication and as kind of grasping at the transcendent. And so that will go to varying degrees, especially when you get into popular fiction. But if you're a parent and you're encountering YouTube, you will find videos that are functionally just interesting sounds and colors that are just dopamine machines for children, and keeping them off that and more towards even like the Saturday morning cartoon is by far improved in that. And it's actually very interesting to come back to some of those cartoons and stories as an adult and look back to as a child. So much, I realize I filled in so much more of the story with my imagination as a child, because you'll come back to them as an adult and realize how absolutely simple they are. But still having that arc, even if it's a blank message, there's a beginning, a middle, and end. Characters have backgrounds and motivations, or maybe it's a documentary where it's trying to teach you something. That something is truly a work of art, and that it has a purpose that it's trying to communicate, and that purpose is something good, and not just say like transgressive or pure pleasure seeking. And so that's a big part of the aspect for me in that, because I think it is very, one of the traps that people fall into today is like, well, my kid reads all the time. And it's like, okay, well, what are they consuming? Whether it's, things of values that you don't agree with, or that's very vacuous. The habits that you form will inform how you think, whether or not you want it to or not. And especially when it comes to children, understanding that they're not necessarily prepared to encounter every message out there, to understand nuance, and that you have to guide them through that as a parent. But that's where I would say that the artistic core of it is there some underlying value that this medium, whether it be animation, the written word, live action, is intending to convey, that's edifying to the person watching it.
And
Sure.
so
Well,
from like a practical standpoint, as far as books go, so like one of the popular early readers right now are these books by this author called Mo Williams. And I
oh,
hate
it's
Mo
the
Williams
Elephant and
books.
Piggy.
Slop books. They are like the pinnacle of slop. They're not even funny Captain Underpants slop. They're just slop. I hate them. And your kids, when you go to the library and you're like, okay, kids, well, you've been practicing your phonics. I think you're ready
They are
for video
ubiquitous.
books. Yeah, they will go to the library and they will pick up Mo Williams books. And Mo Williams books, there's like 2 shelves full of them because everybody loves Mo Williams books except parents. Do you know why? Because Mo Williams books have like a net negative amount of information that they are conveying to you. And the pictures are awful. Well, they're not awful. They're just incredibly simplistic. Like you pick up this book
Okay.
and you're like, worse for having read a Mo Williams book. I hate them. But anyway, that's like the kind of slop content that you can find in fiction when they're really little. There's twaddle. So I'm seeing Christina mentions it in that was a big thing that Charlotte Mason talked about, were books that just like don't have any actual
So
value to them.
Charlotte Mason is the excuse me. What's her theory of education? The
So her Charlotte Mason method, we're not like Charlotte Mason purists or anything. I wanted to be
Yeah.
a Charlotte Mason mom when I started homeschooling and then discovered that it was not for me.
Yes.
But her big things are short lessons, lots of subjects, no twaddle. So everything that you expose your children to should have some sort of value to it, and not necessarily moralistic value. Just like the language should be good. It shouldn't just be filler. It shouldn't be moralizing. Just high quality stuff. Treat children like people because they are. I think she calls it like a broad feast. What else? I like her nature study, which is where children in elementary school aren't really expected to do science because they kind of can't. They do more like naturalism, which is where they go out and they practice their observational skills and they learn about the natural world, especially in their vicinity, in more of a like a naturalistic sort of way, which I appreciate. But yes, there's a lot of nonsense books out there written for children, and you can avoid some of them by sticking to the classics, but I think that comes with its own pitfalls. Because for all, partly it's an issue of language, because you do want children exposed to older forms of language, but also you want books to be engaging to them and not like painful to sit through. So it is really helpful to find that sweet spot between modernized language and themes and timeless quality. And children's fiction hasn't actually been a popular genre to publish for most of our history. It's really a function of incredibly cheap publishing after some technological innovation. So we're sort of still in the early stages of developing that. But yes, so there's a lot of twaddle out there.
And to sort of piggyback on what you're saying, I think formally what you're saying is correct in that there wasn't a lot of children's publishing, but functionally, I mean, I think that at one point was the function of the grandfather's lap, or the father walking beside his son and telling them stories.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So
right.
People used to do a lot more storytelling, just verbal storytelling. And then you would also do a lot more singing at home, and you would do a lot more just family reading at home that wouldn't necessarily be targeted toward children specifically. Reading aloud was a relatively common pastime for certain classes of people, but lots of people sang all the time. And so your primary exposure to language as a child probably wasn't actually the written word until you were school age.
And we can assume that the parents that had the ability to read in front of their family and found that to be a good use of time in general were probably
yeah,
breaking
definitely.
at different points to explain to their children, if the subject was above them or if even just the vocabulary was too
Yeah,
obtuse.
and then they also would have been exposed to a smaller range of very what we would consider advanced language now. So like if your parents could read, you were probably being read to from the Bible. Um, so you had that common cultural heritage in a way that I think we don't have that as strongly now because there is so much variety out there. So like kids now, some kids read Little Blue Truck, some kids read Green Eggs and Ham. Um, and there's just so much variety that you don't necessarily have to have read both. And so you don't have that shared language of childhood. My
Yeah,
kids have read both.
there is the phenomenon of the silos, and certainly we've seen that post internet, but as you're mentioning, we saw these silos starting to develop as soon as there was choice between this this production and that production, and whether we wanted to fall into the ideas and the theories of Dr. Seuss or of Shel Silverstein or of whomever. And so
Yeah.
these often turned into less of of a shared of a shared identity, which is one of the things that I think the Brits did very well in the 20th century. Whether it was the last gasp of the empire, or whether there was something in the water over there, whether it was Milne, whether it was the last vestiges of Kipling, whether it was ultimately running into Tolkien and Lewis and up through Waters. I think I would argue that I'm sorry, not Waters, but Adams, Richard Adams. I think he was probably there towards the very tail end of just this massive publishing that the Brits were able to do there in the 20th century, which I don't think we have seen anything since. I think throughout history we can find portions of that in different civilizations, but I think the last big literary push, especially for children, was probably the 20th century English.
Well, and so chiming in, I think we also have to remember that just the very idea of literature is relatively new civilizationally. The idea that it would be a common thing to even have read is really only post printing press. Beyond that, you would be aware of stories, largely, like you said, through oral traditions or what you would receive going to religious education or in church. But in many ways, the tradition of literature is only a few centuries old. And so we're kind of going on these ups and downs and kind of on that going of siloing, kind of as the 20th century has eroded in English, the Christian tradition, it's kind of lost that real common boundary to where I know I interact with a lot of people and like you that try and talk about literature and don't understand it at a fundamental level because they have no biblical knowledge, no knowledge of, say, particularly Christian history, whether or not I remember I had an art historian instructor, and she said, like, whether or whatever you believe in, you cannot understand Western art history if you don't understand Christianity. You will not like the symbols, the time,
even
history.
even moving into something like Dada and into
Mhm.
counter movements, you're not going to understand what it's countering without the foundation.
Yes, and I would say
Absolutely.
going into those movements, people not understanding that it's where you have the counter movements, and now the counter movements have overtaken the history because people don't realize like Picasso was a perfectly adequate classical painter.
Yes.
What he was doing with his work was extremely intentional, but in now its transmission, that development towards mastery prior to breaking boundaries is kind of lost to where now there isn't even that level of you've mastered the craft and now you get to try and push somewhere new or transgress. It's just
Yes.
the ultimate freedom. And so, circling back,
and that freedom evidences itself in the Gumball, in the Stevens universe, and the
yeah.
everything looking the same. And frankly, um, I don't want to dump too much on the creative efforts that go into those shows, but from a technical standpoint, it is least common denominator.
So what I have a fairly big appreciation for the American animation tradition, going back even to Hanna-Barbera, where it was very deliberately easy and interesting because they were trying to make
Push it
constant
out
new
within the
series rapidly and doing those things. And more the issue with the Steven Universes or the others isn't necessarily the art style, but just the fundamental vacuum of values behind it, to where it's not actually getting at anything edifying to the person engaging with it. And I think not everything has to be high literature or anything like that, but even we look back at folk stories that common people would tell each other had folk wisdom behind it, and you would learn something, and it was passing on a tradition. That now that's kind of lost.
I mean, Bugs Bunny
Sure.
had, I think, more than one Wagner episode, right?
I only know of the one, but in the same vein, the fact that you could take Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie, however you want to frame it, in the 50s and accompany that with various classical pieces and high ideas of heaven and hell, of the transcendent and the base. I mean, there was a time where seemingly, I mean, cream rises to the top, and so maybe we're looking back with the wrong lenses, but seemingly there was a time where we could take these I don't want to say childish forms, but these more simple forms, and accompany them with the grand narratives and the deeper ideas.
Yeah,
You know?
definitely. Well, and my kids will occasionally watch the movie Fantasia, the original one, in the
Yes.
car, and I don't think there's been a effort to present something like The Night on Bald Mountain to children and just expect children to like watch it as a piece of art and get it and like appreciate it. I don't think there's been a something like that in recent memory.
No.
Not with children as members of the expected audience. Like I think there's definitely, and we're totally off track on literature. I'm sorry.
No, I don't think this is perfect. This is
But
great.
yeah, there's been animation that has treated its audience with respect, but it's never expected its audience to be treated with respect and to be also children.
Say that again, please.
So like Fantasia, the expected audience for the movie Fantasia, I believe, was children, right? It's a Disney
Sure.
movie for kids.
Yep.
It treats its audience with the same level of respect as the Animatrix treats its audience with respect, but the Animatrix audience is adults. Like,
That's
so
a
that's
deep
not
cut.
shocking, right? I don't know that people
The
take children seriously as persons in that way.
There are I will give you two exceptions that I can think of. On the literature side, I can't, off the top of my head, I can't quite come up with anything. On the film side, though, I would say Miyazaki,
Oh
not
yeah.
not anime in general, but Miyazaki in particular, would treat children as the primary guests. And then, are you guys familiar with the Cartoon Saloon
No, I
productions at all?
haven't. I'm gonna watch it though.
Okay, so that's a production house. I want to say they're based out of Dublin. I might be wrong on that, but they have their Irish trilogy, and they have some other works. But their big three are The Secret of the Kells,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Song of
Okay.
yeah, Song of the Sea, and then The Wolfwalkers. And I don't think there are some things that are seemingly animated for animation's sake,
Mm-hmm.
and that does go into the infantilization millennials and so on. But with Cartoon Saloon, I do think that their intended audience was the children, but the expectation was that the parents would be able to enjoy it as well.
I think I just thought of another exception, though I'm not sure if his audience was children specifically. But Samurai Jack, I think, was another one that treated children as worthy of actual artistic effort.
Is that Karkovsky or?
Yes.
Yes,
because he
And
does
yeah.
Primal and okay.
He did the original animated Clone Wars. He did Samurai Jack. There's been a couple, but they're definitely few and far between. And you have to value them when you find them, because
Well, and it does. So you scratch something that's kind of interesting, that as Cartoon Network came into its own there in the 90s and it started developing stories and characters, and you had even with the Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Laboratory, which I think were probably two of the biggest at one point, you still had the narrative, less so with Johnny Bravo, but there's some interesting spins you could go on with that. Where was I headed? There was one series in particular that I was thinking, that it could start leading into excess. And so this wasn't Cartoon Network, this was Nickelodeon. However, whether it's Johanan or Johan Vasquez, and so it's the guy who did
Invader Zim.
Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, yes,
Yep.
And then Invader Zim. And so Invader Zim it's interesting and it's good, but I do think it's almost running into that navel gazing.
Yeah, well, he hated his audience. So, he wrote Johnny the Homicidal Maniac to make fun of the kind of people who would read Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, who latched onto it anyway, as people do. But
Right.
I think but I think you can kind of tell that he doesn't like the people who like his work.
I actually did not know that, so that's
fun. But I mean, Invader Zim was just really good.
It was.
I mean,
it was really good.
I'm a millennial woman, of course, with artistic bent. Of course, I like Invader Zim.
Well, so I don't know. It just fired. It fired on different levels, because whether it was laughing about bacon being in the soap or just Gurr as a character or whatever, there was this. Somehow he made the sauce, and I don't even know if he knew what he was doing with it.
He kind of invented the sauce, and then basically through the end of SpongeBob, we were on.
Oh, glory!
Yeah, the fumes. Because when Vasquez, I can't remember his last name. Anyway, I feel like Invader Zim was very raw and new. Like, that kind of humor hadn't really been done, at least for that
outside
audience.
of him, right?
Outside of him,
that was, if I remember correctly, Invader Zim was relatively caged, in that there were many paths that he was not allowed to go down that he wanted.
Yeah, and it was not highly promoted on the channels, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, it was hard to find it.
They didn't quite know what to do with it.
No, they had no idea what to do with it. You had to actually really attempt to watch the show. But yeah, and then I kind of consider children's narratives pre-SpongeBob and post-SpongeBob to kind of be two separate.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I think SpongeBob,
because that was going to lead into a question of, was SpongeBob the beginning of the end for children's entertainment, at least in the current cycle?
Although Ed and Eddie, but Ed and Eddie was also for older kids, and same with South Park, and same with The Simpsons.
I've heard, well, and so we are at a point where now we're referencing the exceptions that prove the rule, because, for example, I have heard good things about what's the one with Waddles? It was Disney. Oh, Adventure? No, not Adventure Time. Oh, I would say it, and whatever.
Waddles?
It's
like Adventure
It
Island.
Waddles the pig, and it's all like there's Illuminati references and
Oh, that one. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I couldn't tell you
yeah.
the name. It's got the
But
like triangle eye guy.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and I can't. Gravity Falls.
Gravity Falls, yeah.
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 Well, and I would say one thing in the arc of entertainment that I think we've seen in that children's entertainment and literature has fallen partially because the amount of children has fallen. So the
Okay.
millennials were the last like large generation, and there
Mhm.
hasn't been a larger generation since.
Yeah.
And so I think you have seen this rise, just like in certain aspects, the baby boomers is still the largest. Lots of things cater to them. In entertainment, millennials have kind of remained that largest demographic, and there hasn't been anything to oust them. And so you've seen a lot of these children's entertainment seeking to grow up with the millennials in many ways to keep that. At least I would postulate. And you just have this over the 20th century and into now, this development of childhood as a more permanent and fixed state of being, not a transition to becoming an adult and integrated human. And that's where I think like you have Walt Disney, whose real goal was to make content that was edifying to children, that would bring them up in that sense of wonder towards adulthood, and that parents could come and transmit those timeless stories in a new way to their children. But it was never like, I think the modern like Disney adult. Like we took our kids to Disneyland when we were in California because I mean, I am still an American, and you have to take your kids to Disneyland.
We were also close. Like we were living relatively close at the time. So it was kind of a shame not to, but
you
that I do think that sort of goes into the infantilization of millennials, and I think you making a point to call out the idea of dropping birth rates stuff. That absolutely makes sense because it goes hand in hand too with. So my argument, and I probably hit on the farming stuff too much, but because I do the farming stuff, it's all straight in front of my brain, and it's always this idea that now in the 21st century, our lives are easier than they had been even 100 years ago, but they're far more complex. And I think we're built for a much harder existence, but also a far simpler existence. And so that I think goes hand in hand with the infantilization, that we are just catching it from all sides right now. And it'll be interesting to see how we make it through this. I would argue not just civilizational, but potentially species is too strong, but there is a bottleneck for people right now trying to get through there.
I would agree with you in many ways, and that's like I think you're completely right in that. Similarly, like as a parent and developing children, it's very easy to make things easy for children. Like the modern world allows us to do that readily, but you need strife, you need struggle to develop character. And there's a lot, and I think as like we've seen in our lives, like we have a large family now, but early on when you have one or two kids, it's very doable to just do everything for them. And it's easier in your life to do everything for them.
Yeah.
When you have, I would say, more than two, it stops being the case, and you make children do more things, and it's better for them, and they kind of come into their own, and you realize that they're developing into
and they're really capable. Yeah.
But a lot of, I think, our modern issues, going back to like entertainment and literature, and really what it's meant to inspire, is meant to inspire that outlook to overcome struggle and build yourself into something greater. I know that's what I look into, like young children's fiction, especially young boys fiction. I've always really enjoyed just the hero story. I've really disliked we have to invert it or we need to do a new twist, because I think there is something very fundamental about the hero's journey going back that is timeless and is necessary to inculcate in especially young boys and also like to young
So
women to extent.
now, if I remember correctly, you said that your major, at least in your undergrad, was philosophy. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is technically art, philosophy, and literature.
Okay.
So, but I mainly focused on philosophy, and I really enjoyed the art history. So I still remember a lot of that.
You
So I'm
impressed me
going to
on many
toss a
days.
little bit of. What was that?
He impressed me on many trips to the museum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. So I'm going to toss a little bit of a grenade out there, and I'm going to be curious to get your perspective. And then eventually we'll move into specifics and what you guys have seen are good examples of this foundation that you're laying. I'm curious, though, how you guys, what your initial perspective on the hero's journey and concept, that whole concept, what you think about it, how it applies. Do you think it's limiting? Is it just recognizing what is, or is it something that should be ignored?
Oh,
Like the Joseph Campbell's writing specifically?
Yes, in particular, Campbell,
Oh man,
what he
it's
was
been like
writing
10
and
years
where he
since
was
I read
headed.
Campbell. So
yeah, I don't know. I think I might only even know him secondarily, but I think the concept of the hero, the growing up, because really the hero's journey is fundamentally the transition from boyhood to manhood. In some way, the going out, the making yourself, and I think it's more important than ever in modernity, where we do not have those transitions for young men in many ways. I think women, in a lot of ways, they have a more natural transition, which is motherhood, where you're no longer a girl, obviously,
Right.
and that's a physiological one. But I think there's been a multitude of people that for young men, there really isn't in modern society like what makes you a man fully.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have like the extended adolescence, and it's kind of easy to coast if you want to.
So there is a stream I did. I can't remember if it was two back or three back. It was a stream I did here relatively recently, and it was on the idea of the dog book. And when I say the dog book, I'm talking the big three that I named were Old Yeller, Big Red, and then Where the Red Fern Grows.
I
Because my
love
argument there, it, my argument there was that these were, or let me walk it back. I could not find that in any other culture. That's sort of a coming of age with the dog by your side, and usually the dog passing away either because it had to or as an act of sacrifice, something along those lines. And it seemed pretty evident to me that that was an expression of American, to make it sound haughty, of American manhood, and that
Mhm.
young men grew up with these dogs and they were there by their side. And so it can't have been exclusive throughout history, in that I'm sure Romans and Anatolians and different people groups throughout history were using dogs in the same way. But the fact that we had the frontier, we were using the dogs, and we had access to the printing press at that time, I think those dog books were one of the last gasps of the boy moving into manhood, that rite of passage. Because even up into the 70s, almost every grandfather had stories of the dogs that he had raised. So
Yeah, and I think it was so. I would probably posit that that's actually fairly unique, because I think Americans really get their companionship and closeness to dogs from the Anglo heritage, from England, because even most of Europe doesn't have such a close relationship with dogs. I mean, I had a
well, I
immigrant
would I
Italian
would put in the
grandmother,
great
and
the
she's
greater
like,
the
"Why
greater
would you want dogs
Germanic.
in the house?" But it does go through the American tradition, and I think with dogs for children, it also and being near animals, it's a confrontation with mortality.
Mhm.
as a parent, one of the oddest things encountering it with your children is eventually they will realize they can die and
Oh
will go
man.
through a crisis.
Okay, so in our history curriculum, we started with ancient history, and it had part of it was reading an excerpt from the Epic of Gilgamesh. And this sent my son, my eldest, I was not prepared for this at all, into like a 3-week struggle with his mortality. So, just as a heads up, when you start touching, because that's the major theme of the book. And, but yeah, so like just like suddenly realizing it, he must have been what, 4 or 5?
4 or 5.
Yeah.
And,
And like he had known about death before, like we had talked about it, but like it didn't really hit until he had that experience with it through literature. And then,
Mm-hmm.
we've been very fortunate to avoid major deaths in the family. But yeah, so like that first experience with mortality is really impactful for kids. And then I imagine watching a dog that you raise as a puppy as a young boy, but you'll outlive it. It seems like a natural rite of passage for a young man, a dog that you're very attached to. So that kind of makes
especially in the U.S. and moving into the frontier. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially in a time in which, and culture in which, you don't have lots of natural deaths from like the big plagues and stuff that because we were just relatively healthier people with a lot more calories and a lot more space.
Yeah.
Are we Dutton fans on this stream?
Dutton.
Who are the Duttons?
Ed Dutton. It doesn't. No, not Yellowstone.
I think I've heard of him, but
yeah, no worries.
That's all right.
No worries.
But yeah, okay. Well, so while we're on the topic of young boys, I can share a couple of things that my oldest is in 4th grade.
Okay.
Anthropologist. Okay. I can share some of the things that they've liked. So my husband enjoys fantasy and kind of always has. My kids my 2 oldest, one is 9 and one is 7, just finished Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and found it incredibly mid. And I'm sort of offended by this.
So if I can nerd out for just a second here, Mr. Juniper, the fantasy, do you like it because it enables people to tell better stories, or do you like it because it's fantastical? And really what I'm headed towards, are you, to make it simplistic, are you a fan of soft magic or hard magic, and why?
So I think I would lean on because it allows better stories, and I would say the soft versus hard magic distinction. I wouldn't say I'd prefer either, because I look at it's the medium in which you can express ideas and values, and certain stories are more appropriate. Like I think the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's world of soft magic is perfect for what he was trying to convey. But you can have a more structured and rigorous high magic to convey different things. But as far as the fantastical, I've always been a big fan of fairy tales and things, and I think the fantasy allows us to go beyond,
like realism,
beyond just the reality in front of us, to see the transcendent beyond it. And that's where, like, I'm obviously a big Tolkien fan and live it looking into what, and I think I would argue probably the greatest English author of the 20th century. Not just because he's popular, but just for what he has created.
Oh dear. I can't say anything about this because I've gotten into word matches with people online, because I tend to agree with you. But there is a particular group of people that I respect that find him subpar.
So I think it's perfectly fine for it to not be your
or
taste.
even particularly middle class.
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
I mean, I don't read fantasy that much, so
but that's where I
whatever.
really
This
enjoy
is
the
yours.
fantastical, because it allows just those expansion of situations. In the same way, I quite enjoy science fiction. I was also a big fan of Heinlein and Asimov, and how the medium allows you to explore interesting ideas and kind of act out the logical conclusion of these various problems and things within the context of a coherent world that, like, obviously that would never be the case in the real world, but let's play with these ideas. Where would they go? How would it interact with people?
Well, because on that level, you could almost say that they are fulfilling the same. They are operating within the same constraints as, say, the Underground Man, Dostoevsky, in that these are things that are possible within a particular world, but even within the world, they're marching within the absurd. And so the Underground Man is doing things that are absurd. Well, I mean, frankly, much of Dostoevsky, they're doing things that are functionally absurd, but they're still acting within the rules of that particular fantasy, and it produces the narrative and the point that he's driving at.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also don't think there is really a hard boundary between science fiction and fantasy. They're functionally the same genre. It's just, I think we artificially distinguish technology versus magic, even though technology is just running lightning through rocks in specific formations. I mean, it sounds like magic to me.
I think more of the distinction is, like, is it meant to be a depiction of the past or meant to be a depiction of the future? I prefer sci-fi. Most of the sci-fi that we've both enjoyed has been, your taste has seemed to be more like character driven. At least the Heinlein stuff, it's very much about the characters in the world, not about the world itself.
I'd agree.
Yeah. And I think that's also your taste in fantasy. I'm not
Well,
in many ways.
I've attempted to get into Bryan Sanderson books and have never been able to, because I'm not really into reading people's world building notes from their D&D campaign. And some people are into that, and more power to you. It's just not my cup of tea. So
my longest argument, and I want to hit something that Miss Whitaker put up here in a second. My frustration with Sanderson is in having fun developing all his ideas and chasing all the threads and explaining everything, he loses. In building his world, he loses his world. Yes.
Yeah, it's just kind of like...
It just becomes mechanistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I haven't read Sanderson, but if you explain everything, it loses the magic. And this is even... I think you actually see that same thing when you try to explain everything in the real world as well, and lose those kind of historical or fantastical or folk narratives of viewing things, and kind of default to kind of the scientific materialism.
I will say I need to bring it up here in a few minutes. I do have a critique of Tolkien that I'll be curious to get your perspective on. But Christina Whitaker, she threw up, isn't fantasy really good at making the good and evil obvious so that children can understand? And I'm curious what you guys think about that.
I think, yes, it can be. And I would say it makes the good and evil obvious in a way that's not
moralizing, patronizing.
Well, and kind of trite. Like, you can be obvious that, like, you can externalize the concepts that you're trying to talk about, as opposed to many modern stories where the conflict is like within a singular character. And that's really helpful. And I think it's particularly helpful for children, but I think it actually is very helpful to pretty much anyone because we have a
Yes.
tendency to get in our own heads and kind of returning. Because I return periodically and reread like just the old like Grimm's fairy tales or old folk
Mm-hmm.
tales or ancient mythology. I know you
Some of those are
reading
weird.
Aesop's fables and some of the things, but
Yeah.
there is true wisdom in those simple stories that even if they're not technically correct, they're more
Yeah.
correct than kind of what you see in reality.
Do you guys remember The Fisherman's Wife? It's a Grimm's fairy tale.
Which one is that?
So it's the one where the fisherman's wife, or if I remember it correctly, the basis is that the man is out there, he catches a fish, and the fish says that he will give the fisherman's wife whatever it is she wants if the man will just put him back. And
I don't
so
remember
it
that one. I remember one about a fish in a ring, but
Mhm. Well, where I'm ultimately headed with it is that they continue to go through the same process, and the man keeps putting the fish back, and the woman is asking for bigger and bigger things. And where I was headed with that, and just how, especially older fantasy, one of the cool things about it is, especially when it's not um, Sanderson build your own world type thing, but they're having it set here in our world. It it can almost be used as a primer, as a primer for us nowadays to understand the context and what they were writing. So my example with the fisherman's wife is that she asked to be leader of the farm, if I remember correctly, and then ultimately she asked to be king. Then she asked to be emperor, and then above emperor, she asked to be pope. And this was one of her great
Yeah.
big wishes, was that she wanted to be pope. And I can remember reading that as a kid and being like, "Huh? What does that mean? Like, why is being pope a big thing?" But then it's like now you read it as an adult, and it's like, this is breaking it down for children how big of a deal the pope was in this day and
yeah.
age.
Mhm.
It's I think fantasy or stories that stories that explain these concepts to children can also be good for us to uptake and have a better understanding of what was going on in Russia and Europe and so on and so forth.
One of the interesting things, though, that I've noted with my kids is that while my husband and I really like sci-fi and fantasy, I'm more like the sci-fi fan. Our children, especially when they're really young, seem to not actually like the fantastical that much, or like not very overtly fantastic. They really like things that are very grounded in like very mundane living. So they'll have like little
Okay.
animal characters. One of their favorite stories are the Frog and Toad books by
Okay.
Arnold
That's what I was.
Lobel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's just a frog and a toad and their friends, and then they just go about their lives.
Mhm.
One of the stories is the toad loses a button, and they spend all day trying to look for the button, and then they finally find the button, but it's in his house, and then they sew the button
Mhm.
back on, and then they're excited. And this story, I think I've probably read Toad loses his button 20 times per kid
Yes. Yep.
in the space of 9 years, and they love it. Other ones that they really like, they like Roald Dahl books do this really well, where there'll be
I was
something
thinking
that's
him
kind
as
of
yeah.
crazy and actually really dark and dangerous. They like that element of Roald Dahl too, where there's real consequences for the things that happen in his world. Um, but most of what's happening is not very like high fantasy. Mostly it's like, oh, well, you're hanging out in the conference room, um, playing with your pet mouse, and while you're staying with your grandma because your parents died, and then it's a conference of
Yes.
witches and they curse you into being a mouse, and like
Yes.
you never like turn back into a boy because they're witches. And your grandma's not a witch and she's not going to turn you back. So you just like
Mhm.
die young with your grandma. And like the good ending of the story is that you don't outlive the like one relative you have left. But they
Yeah.
love it. They love the witches. But it's just like they like really mundane books. Bread and Jam for Francis
Well,
is another favorite.
I think you hit on something interesting there. The the fantastical taking place within the non-fantastic.
Yeah, they like
And
it. Well,
I'm
and
phrasing
fairy
it
tales are
poorly,
like that
but
too. Because
yeah.
they don't like the fairy tales where, crazy stuff is happening. Well, and I think this is
Mhm.
what a lot of modern kids writers get wrong, is
Yes.
because they like a lot of writers like, including me, like a lot of fantasy things to be extremely imaginative or whatever. But kids are still
Yes.
pretty interested in just what's going on in their normal life with like just one "what would happen if" kind of question thrown in
Well,
for good.
that's I'm thinking E.B. White and something like
Mhm.
Charlotte's Web.
Oh, they love
You
Charlotte's
know,
Web too. Yeah, same kind of
it's
thing.
it's incredibly fantastic, but it doesn't fit that
But it doesn't have the
stereotypical
like
mold we
high
have of
fantasy
right.
feel. Yeah.
Yep.
So they didn't even my kids didn't even like Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe, though we'll probably come back to it. Right now my
I
boys
mean,
are
They'll
really in.
read it as adults and
Yeah,
I
think
if they
it's
want
amazing.
to. It's
Right.
okay. I
Yeah.
mean it's good, but if it's not your thing, it's not your thing. They really like my kids really like historical fiction. Right now, my eldest is
Hmm.
really into this book, this nonfiction book. Well, it's historical fiction in that it's written from the perspective of Marco Polo, but they're not really taking liberties
Yes.
with a lot of the facts.
Okay. Yep.
Um, uh, he's really into that. My second son is really into this book on the Pony Express.
Okay.
I don't know where he put it. He's going to be mad when he can't find it. But he's really into that. And then they're also really into this history curriculum that I picked up for them. It's Story of Civilization. It's sort of like a Catholic answer to Story of the World, which is another really popular history curriculum
Okay.
that's kind of more in the like living book Charlotte Mason tradition, where it'll have like a
Mhm.
lot of facts and then it'll give you excerpts written as if they are um, like from the perspective of characters who would be living at the time. And they really, really enjoy that. They have it on audiobook and love it. It's a little bit above their reading level. So
Yeah.
audiobooks are really helpful for that, especially because my voice gets shot by these
So
books.
I didn't ask you before you guys came on. I don't know how much time you have. I'm perfectly fine continuing, but I just don't want to hold you over
We're about an hour
if
in.
it's too much.
I've
Yeah.
got more time.
Yeah, I do like another
Okay.
30 minutes if that works
So
for you.
if it, whatever works for you guys is fine for me. I've got all night when I do these. Having said that, so I think we've laid a pretty good foundation. We've been talking about the big ideas. If you guys wanted to just start jumping in, say by age group, 3 to 5, 5 to 8, 8 to 10, and just go through what you guys have really found valuable at these different age groups, and what you know I think you said your oldest was in fourth grade, so then
Mhm.
moving past that, where you guys think you're going to encourage, because maybe it's going to be another Chronicles of Narnia and it doesn't wash out the way you expect it to, but
Yeah. So 3 to 5 is still mostly parents reading to kids.
mhm.
When my eldest two were in that age, we were actually mostly doing a lot of poetry memorization. What is the book? I can't remember. It was I picked it up from some podcasts on classical education.
Were you guys fans of nursery rhymes, or did you skip those and go to a different subset
Oh,
of
we like
poetry?
nursery rhymes too. We've had a couple of editions of Mother Goose. And then now that my daughter's actually getting old enough to do it, we're doing a lot of the clapping games, which are a lot more fun. I don't know why that's a little girl thing. None of the boys were ever interested in Miss Mary Mac, but it is something about skipping rope rhymes and hand clap games is just like incredibly feminine, and it's so fun to have at least my one girl, so I can carry on the
Interesting.
tradition of the hand clap games. Um, say my playmate. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. I'm remembering that as a kid. That
yeah,
was a girl thing.
it was. It
Okay.
is. It's a girl thing. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Same with skipping rope. Um, right now, my youngest or my fifth and my fourth children, so third and fourth son.
Yes.
Yeah, third and fourth son are really into this book of classic bedtime stories by Scott Gustafson. He's actually released a couple of different volumes of fairy tales, and I think he really hits the sweet spot between updated modern language, which is hard to find in versions of Grimm's. A lot of
Okay.
those older collections of fairy tales are very much like an academic pursuit and not really written to be like tellable to your kids right out of the book.
Okay.
He has beautiful illustrations and updated language, and also the stories, except for the no. So he doesn't dumb down the stories at all. Like if a character dies in the story or gets eaten or like turns into a toad, it's going to happen in his books, which I appreciate. We also have another collection of bedtime stories, and I'm having to edit back in what actually happens to the three little pigs when the wolf blows down their house. And it's not that they run away, it is that they get eaten. And you should not be lazy. You should build your house right the first time. Um, yeah. So I do find some collections of kids' fairy tales make them more palatable to sensitive parents. But kids actually really like the stakes to be pretty high.
Well, and that's lesson teaching, like Mr. Juniper had been talking about.
Yeah. Well, they think it's funny.
This is in a part I know I really enjoy, like going back to like Aesop's fables and Bullfinch's mythology, and carrying on those traditions and values, because they will absorb a lot of those, and then they'll ask a lot of times interesting questions, and you get to explain to them what's going on and why this happened. Like what is it? The scorpion and the
Toad.
Scorpion and the toad.
Mm-hmm.
And those sort of life lessons. And
Aesop's great. I love Aesop.
Aesop's fantastic. And those are really foundational. And I think you combine them as much as you can. Like we're Catholics, so we religious teaching, going to church, and then explaining stories to them. And one I know I have found this year as I'm teaching kids the communion, a lot of times we kind of expect kids will absorb a lot of things actively, but you do kind of have to re-engage them and ask, like, do you actually know what's going on? Because a lot of times they will not, and get them to engage and follow and understand the fundamental of how everything's flowing to get them to go into it. And I think that goes into literature where you start off basic, and then you kind of move them into steadily more complex and mature stories as they go. And I find, I know when I was growing up, I kind of, like, my parents were kind of happy just as long as I was reading something.
Right. Yes.
And I'm kind of in the similar vein where I'm trying to expose different things. And if you hit on like, oh, this is a certain type of thing you like, then let's find the best example of that genre. Because most genres, whatever they are, will have something that's actually a work of art and edifying. To where if they don't necessarily like fantasy, they like historical fiction, that's fine. But really tailoring it and looking at, what is in this that they're consuming. And I think partially it's keeping them bored enough to where they'll do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is a struggle.
Yep.
Because
we either have to assign it for school, or we have to set aside time in the day in which they're not allowed to do anything else fun.
Sure.
Because there's just so much else that's fun to do. And they have a lot of creative hobbies. And then, games are always a temptation. They don't get them during the week, but if they're...
As in video games?
Yeah, as in video games.
Yeah.
But if they're like bored and they think mom's going to have a weak-willed day, which does happen occasionally,
yes,
they can push. I'm like, no, go read your book.
I remember taking advantage of my mother. So the longer story is that not exclusively, but for most of my education as a child, I was homeschooled. And yeah, there were definitely
Yeah.
times where we took advantage of her. One of the things, though, that especially the brother that came after me, our dad was very. If he had heard of the book, what am I trying? We could get away with a lot more of reading stuff with him than we could with our
Yeah.
mom.
I
Yeah,
you
and
know, I
so it.
try. So a lot of the stuff that you would think that you need to be worried about content wise, I think is
Mhm,
actually fine. And then there's a
right,
lot of stuff that I got away with reading as a kid that it's like I was either my parents either had no idea what was in that book at all, or
right.
because it was a classic, it was deemed like safe, good to go for kids. But like I was reading Candide in like eighth grade, and that messed me
Hmm.
up. There's definitely time and
Well,
place for the
that's
classics too.
I think I was in middle school when I read A Clockwork Orange.
Yeah,
So
probably not gonna go
right.
on our kids' reading lists just because it's like that doesn't do anything for you but mess you up.
Yes. Yep.
And it's not slop, but and it might not even have like really gratuitous sex or violence, but it's still
Right.
just like not. It's not good for you. It's like drinking bleach.
Well,
Why
that's
would you?
I've yet to do Lolita, but just the idea of you're you're supposed to read it and you're supposed to appreciate the character and sort of realize 5/6 of the way through that, oh my goodness, I'm halfway taking his side, like how awful is this? And that's just those sort of abstractions and recognitions. I think it's unfair to, as much as going back to the beginning of the stream when we were talking about, make your don't treat children as lesser beings,
Yeah,
actually value them consuming your creation, value that. um, Also be aware that they are still children, and
yeah, and they're
there are
developing.
certain responsibilities that they shouldn't be expected to meet.
Yeah. Um, and then I think there's some books where it's like, well, you could read it as a child and you could probably kind of understand what's going on, but it's
Hmm.
sort of a waste of your time when you could be reading something that's closer to what you can actually apply to your experience. So I read Anna Karenina when I was in high school. And what in the world is some ninth grader who's never been kissed gonna have to think about the spicy love affair of some like Russian aristocrats? Nothing. I
Yes.
didn't. I could read the story. I could summarize for you what was happening, but it wasn't until I was an adult and had actually like, some history of romance or, some
Well,
ideas of my
even
own or experience with friends who've had it where I could have
yes.
actually
Oh my
gotten
goodness.
anything meaningful out of it.
So actually, let's do these in orders. So Christina Whitaker, she
Yes,
also, I'm going to pull
Dinotopia.
up.
Yes.
Okay, do you guys like those?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so James Gurney, I believe is his name. He has the best, most instructional YouTube videos on the internet, and he's amazing. He has
Okay.
such a like a workman's approach to illustration that I just
Yes.
respect the man so
Okay.
much. And Dinotopia is really cool too, but like I love him as an illustrator, and honestly, he should be charging for like what he puts on YouTube. So
Fair enough. Because I had friends that read them. I just, dinosaurs didn't do it for me. So I never got into
yeah,
it.
Um,
I was a dino girl. None of our kids have been
for
though.
me, I found Dinotopia. It really wasn't the stories. I can't even remember what they were, but it was the
Okay.
illustrations that were like,
Yeah.
this
Okay.
is just such a
You fill in your
fantastical
own.
world, and it felt like art.
Yeah.
Are you guys familiar with Graham Base?
What did he
Animalia.
write?
He did Animalia. He did what's the one, the Song of the Seahorse, or the Sign of the Seahorse. He's an Australian illustrator and author. Let me see. Oh yeah, I can pull because we're in the 21st century. So give me just a moment here. All right. I think that's, is it like, so I'm totally misspelling it. Oh yeah. Okay. All right. So like Animalia is his big one. The 11th Hour. Um, yeah, The Sign of the Seahorse. Are you guys familiar with any of
I
these?
think
I
I've
don't think I've ever
seen
seen
these.
these.
I've never read them.
Okay.
But looking at this art style, like I feel that this has been
I think this might have
in my
been,
periphery before.
yeah.
Yes. So like Animalia is one he did, and
I'll have
it's
to
I'm
look at
trying to
them.
find what it is the alphabet, and so then he does
Mhm.
like, okay, here's you. Unruly unicorns upending urns of ultramarine umbrellas. And I remember being a kid and thinking that was just
Yeah,
the
kids
craziest,
love
coolest book.
um that kind of illustration too, where they can really spend a lot of time kind
Yeah,
of
well, and
puzzling out the pictures.
he intentionally hides tons of Easter eggs in there.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah,
like
I'll have
this
to.
one is you, and so you see umbrellas and
Well, and I
uh,
appreciate that he's
Uncle Sam.
teaching the
Yeah.
kids the word ultramarine or urn.
Yep.
There's a lot of, again, slop kids writing out there where they're just going to be like, oh, it's an umbrella. And then they draw a
Yes.
picture of like a cartoon cat sitting in an umbrella. And then that's it.
Yeah, and I would think kind of the rule of thumb. I know there's some comments on how do you recommend introducing a boy to Old Yeller, the age and the ages of things is always strive to introduce. You want things to be a little more difficult than they can handle,
But just a
at the
little
moment,
bit.
because you do want it to be a growth moment, like just like with anything else. Because just going
Yeah.
back and rereading is not. And though I would say a big thing as a parent is if you're going to introduce something like that, you need to have an answer that you can communicate to explain. Because they'll ask you, like I said, like when you have like the whole like kids will like they read Old Yeller and they'll be like, oh, I can die. Like what
Yes.
happens when I die?
Yep.
What does that look like? And those are like the questions of mortality that you're going to get from like a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old.
Mhm.
And you really do have to have something to say. It doesn't have to be some like academic answer, but what do you want to impart to your children of how you view the world and how the world
Yeah.
ought to be viewed?
Well, and they're also going to ask you stuff like, okay, well, if you and dad die,
Yeah.
what happens? Or, so like my daughter is convinced that if I die and dad dies and Pat or my husband dies, she is going to be the one who does the boxcar children life and raises her their younger brothers.
Okay. Yes.
But I also can tell her, oh yeah, Jan Brett's also great. But like you got to tell her like, okay, well these are the people that you're going to go live with if me and your dad die, or oh well, what if one of my brothers dies, and and then also kind of
So
how to
I
talk
would.
about those things delicately in
Yeah.
public, because they'll just start talking to strangers about mortality and like,
So, well, and that's a really good point, and that's where I was going to head with Old Yeller. Um, I'm trying to figure out how much plot I want to give away about myself. Anyways, let's just go with this. Um, Mortality salience, I think, is a worthwhile thing. Frankly, that we as a culture don't have to deal with as much anymore. However, it's front and center in Old Yeller, and well, I guess it's to the rear. Whatever, however you want to describe it, it's right. It's right there. You can't get around it.
Mhm.
I'm also of the mind that Old Yeller, yeah, 8 years old. I see Abbott saying 8 years old. I would say as soon as a child can read Old Yeller, I
Yeah.
think they're good for it. Now, maybe I give too much leeway to kids, but if they, unless it's just smut or ultraviolence, if they can read it, I'm kind of down with them. No, that's not entirely true because
I would say I put it in the category where you said if it's a story where you're kind of supposed to have that higher level thought where you recognize that you're sympathizing with something you shouldn't, and you're supposed to recognize kind of that dissonance and conflict. That's a very adult tone to be
yes,
able to understand what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and its implications. If it's a story that's meant to do that, that's probably not appropriate to children because they're just
Yep.
not capable of that leap yet. But if it's just dealing with harsh realities,
yeah,
really,
Go
as soon
for
as
it.
they can read it, go for it, because that is the world they live in.
because I was thinking too. I'll use a book that's in a similar vein of Old Yeller, but for adults or whatever. So Old Yeller, read it as a child, and then it means now, having lived my life, it means 10 times more going back and reading it. And I think even as an adult, I connect with this child's book much more than I did as a child. A similar book in that vein, I would say once a boy is 15, 16, give him Lonesome Dove. He
I've
is
never read that.
not going. What's that?
I've actually never read Lonesome Dove, and I really have been meaning to get around to it.
It's you're either going to love it or hate it. I mean, I guess it's as simple as that because it is a very he writes Lonesome Dove in particular, out of the four within that series, he writes Lonesome Dove as if it is a painting of the Old West. He is
Oh, I'll
he is
probably
willing
love
to
it.
put hundreds of words into the prairie and the saddle and the ride, and you don't feel the story moving forward, but it
Oh,
is
that's fine.
ultimately a
Yeah.
part of it. But so 15 or 16, have your son read Lonesome Dove. However, they are not going to get the existential issues that are going on. They're not going to get the issues of morality, of what it meant to sleep with a soiled dove, to have slept with the town whore, and how that affects a man's future and how he views himself. They're not going to be able to understand that at 16, but
Yeah. One of the other things that is interesting, especially when you're reading fiction from a really wide range of time periods, is sort of making the distinction between books that you have to address their the way that they talk about different groups. So like certain language,
like the Huckleberry Finn issue.
like kind of like Huckleberry Finn, or like using the word Eskimo or things like that.
Okay. Yeah.
There's so we really like Kipling in this family.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so one of the first books that we did as like a family read aloud once the older boys were really reading well. So not just like as instructional reading or just me reading to them, was the Just So stories, and they love them.
Yes.
And one of the things that I really appreciate about Kipling is that even though his language is often really outdated in the way that he references people who aren't like European, he has an immense respect for other people as people with their own motivations who are contending with the world. And that's one of the reasons that Kipling will pass muster, I think, for us, even though the language isn't updated to like modern sensibilities. But there are a lot of other people who are writing in his time who have different attitudes about different groups. And I don't want to have to get into a history lecture every time we every time we read
like,
books.
Is it Belloc who did the Maxim gun?
What
That's
Maxim?
one of them I'm thinking of. What is it? Regardless of whatever they have, we will win, for we have the Maxim gun, and they do not. I think it was Hilaire Belloc.
Yeah. But anyway, it is kind of difficult to like decide when you're first opening a book written a long time ago. Well, is this something that I'm going to have to address when we read this book? Because there are people who are purists who are like, oh well, you shouldn't have to address it at all. The book should stand for itself. Well, like sure, but like I don't want my kid running around outside saying expletives to like random
Yes.
passersby. Like we are going to have to address it in so far as the context of the like world in which we live now, right?
Yes.
And
Well, it's like
I
when your
like
grandfather's
it.
name is Richard.
I like it to
Just
be something that we have to address for language and not for attitude. And I think that's sort of my dividing line. Is
ooh, I like how you. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And I think you can see this with like quote unquote woke books as well as like anti woke books. There's one book that was actually on the chopping block for a popular curriculum a while ago. It's a book called They Were Strong and Good. And it's about I think it's a really worthwhile kids book that my kids haven't really attached themselves to it. It's a picture book about going back in time through the family tree of a child who's asking about her family. I believe it's a girl. And they talk about the good things and the bad things that her family did. Like there were slave owners in her family tree, and there were also people who fought on both sides of the Civil War and all of that. But there's an immense amount of respect paid to the people in their time as people of their time. And I think that's a really helpful attitude to have when you're reading books about people from a long time ago and also books written a long time ago. And if you can't have that attitude of respect, then it's not really something that I think we can usually find something better. So it's not like I would prevent my kids from reading it, but it's definitely not something I would choose to assign to them. So, and that's sort of like my benchmark for that. Because there are a lot of people who are like, oh, well, you should only be reading the classics. Well, I'm not reading Grimm's fairy tales to my kids because the language is really old and I find it boring and the pacing is weird. And, you know, I'm not going to broach 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea without like being convinced that you're not going to just call people racial slurs on the street. So,
was there stuff in?
I think I think it was that one.
Okay.
There were a lot of adventure stories from that time that have that kind of attitude. So, yeah.
So it is almost, you know, what is the spirit of the book? It's a soft word. I hate saying that, but
the spirit of the thing I think is a really good way to put it. So like we love Kipling.
Yes.
And I'm willing to suffer a couple of uncomfortable conversations for the sake of Kipling. And he's hilarious. The Just So stories are wonderful. You should definitely read them for yourself and then also to your kids.
Yes. I remember those as a kid, and then now I will, you know, I'll just sit and read a couple of his poems. He had a very good understanding and ability to present ideas that people would naturally prickle against, like hierarchy and monarchy and feudalism in such a way that maybe even in this is dangerous water. I think perhaps not with as much meat as Chesterton, but perhaps that initial consideration to get you to the point where you could get to Chesterton on certain ideas. Kipling is potentially a better start.
Well, and also one of the reasons I think he holds up so well as children's fiction when like The Water Babies doesn't, is that his language is so straightforward because he is very witty.
Yes.
But the language is also aged really well. So you don't have to like translate Kipling for your kids to understand him. They'll just get Kipling because he's Kipling. And
he has going back to the ages. Kipling has stuff for adults all the way to Just So stories. Would you say as soon as a child can read it?
Yeah, well, and
at
even
it.
before that, like I think Just So Stories is appropriate to read aloud to your kids when they are not literate. Because like
How the
how the
camel
whale
got
got
his
his
hump.
throat is just funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I like Just So Stories way better than I like Winnie the Pooh. My kids have not liked Winnie the Pooh at all. The actual A.
Oh, oh,
So
oh.
A. Milne, I think, is funnier when you're a little bit older because I think a lot
Okay.
of his jokes are meant for parents.
Okay.
Um, that kind of fly over the heads of the kids.
One of the things that, and maybe I could be reading him poorly. One of the things I like about how I understand Milne is, man, he's very good. He's very good with adventure,
Yes. His
and with
pacing is
that,
great.
yeah, with that desire to go out and participate. We don't know
Mhm.
what we're going to participate in. We don't know. We just know that we're going to go out and participate. And I love that idea.
Yeah. So that's kind of it for like super strong recommendations for 3 to 5.
Hmm.
Once they start getting into the upper grades, since we're homeschooling, we actually use a curriculum that
Yes.
assigns literature. We use Sunlight. They have a secular version. I believe it's called Bookshark. Um,
Okay.
I've looked at the reading list for both of them, and I really like
Yes.
them. One of the things that I like best about that company is that they, unlike a lot of other homeschool programs that I found, put a lot of
Hmm.
emphasis on having a good balance between quote unquote girls' books and boys' books.
Hmm.
Um, so you'll get like Black Stallion thrown in there, but which is like the quintessential girls' book. But then you'll also
Is
get
it?
book. Oh yeah, that
But he
book.
goes to war.
Yeah, but it's a horse book. Horse girls are a type of girl.
Yeah. Oh. This is okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I know,
Yep.
I know. So
No,
it's
I'm not
not
going to
like
say
gendered
anything.
in that boys can't love it, but like the Black Stallion has made
Well, so I
millions of horse girls.
as a fella who has spent a lot of time staring at a horse's butt. Um, I never mind. I'm not. Yeah, that's not the point of the stream. Okay, never mind. Mouth shut.
You're good. You're good. Well, and then they also have some more like less animal focused books. They'll have stuff about girls who, save a lighthouse or whatever. But they'll also have oh my
Okay,
gosh.
here. Sorry, I'll just let it out. Horse girls piss me off because what happens is they get all, ooh, I'm gonna get this Dutch warm blood, or I'm gonna get this working bred quarter horse, and then it's the dude at the stable who has to end up cleaning up after the horse, getting the horse calmed down, getting it out there so she can mount the horse on the riding block. And in the picture that so many, not all of them, they're amazing horsewomen, but the picture that the general horse girl has of how she's going to participate with this horse,
Yeah.
exhausting.
Very
Okay, sorry.
yeah, a little delicate. um I think girls have a very romantic many women have a very romantic idea of horses. I was never a horse girl.
Yeah.
I lived in the tropics and that wasn't really a thing. So
No. Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
All right.
so I was doing things with lizards, catching lizards. I was really
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And scuba diving. So horses weren't really on my radar until we moved to somewhere where it got colder. But anyway, yeah. So one of the things that I like, one of the reasons I picked the curriculum that we use for literature, is because of the good balance between boy books and girl books. Even though there's not really such thing as a boy book and a girl book,
Mhm.
but just like general interest.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'm thinking Pride and Prejudice in basically any Austen is recognized by most men as, oh, this is a worthwhile
yeah,
exploration
yeah.
of the feminine mind.
you can have a target audience.
Yeah.
But like you're allowed to read stuff. Like I read
Mhm.
Heinlein and
Mhm.
all kinds of men's fiction all the time because I just like
Yes.
it and I'm going to. And then you've read probably some female targeted fantasy, maybe. Well, you read
Yes.
Harry Potter. What else?
The Tamara Pierce.
The
books.
Tamara Pierce books. That's right.
I'm not familiar with those at all.
They're very of their time,
Yeah. It
but
was
they
kind of
were
like a precursor, like one of the very early young adult fantasies. But her whole thing, it's very like looking back, I'm like, wow, these books.
are very feminist.
They're very feminist.
In
I'm
like not the current iteration of feminism, like an older iteration.
Well, I'm trying to think. Is the did you guys ever do the what's it? His Dark Majesty or
Oh, His Dark Materials.
yes, the polar bear one?
Yeah, I was disappointed that the animals didn't feature more heavily.
Okay, yeah.
So I actually, it's an interesting looking back because I remember those being popular and being, I think I was a young teen.
Mm-hmm.
And just hearing or seeing like, oh, this is an overtly like atheist novel or
Mhm.
something against
Yes.
God, and just kind of getting that like that's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it immediately turned me out.
This is what our parents thought Harry Potter was.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think he wanted there to be more of a backlash against them for publicity reasons than there ever
Sure.
was.
Yep.
But they weren't as engaging as Harry Potter, so there wasn't as much backlash as Harry Potter.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
Harry Potter, that
Also very of its time.
that series just fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, well, I guess my opinion, because I have a friend who's he writes like I would say a very well written Harry Potter fan fiction, at least set in the universe. So it's kind of brought up memories. But I remember right around the 5th book it dropping off, and I realized J.K. Rowling doesn't know anything about young men.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
And so that's where it immediately turned me down, because as you're going like with Harry, like when he's a young boy, a lot of these things make sense. But as he's developing into a young man, he doesn't develop into a man. And he doesn't make decisions that a young man would.
Yeah.
He kind of remains the boy throughout.
Yeah, so this isn't...
And that just completely turned me off.
I have not read these. So... okay, so would you say
can stop
that
after the 4th book and just call it good.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
so I was going to ask you, would you guys say that that's a series that So when I was growing up, the argument was, oh, you can't let your kids read them because they'll turn into Satanists. But I never heard anything about the quality of the books themselves. Would you guys say, just from a quality standpoint, it
I would
gets
say
to a
the
point where it's not worth it?
4 were very decent, popular
Mhm.
fiction. Like they were perfectly reasonable stories, and at the time it was kind of fantastical in the right way to mesh with the world. Like it was real enough and new enough in its concept to kind of be the phenomenon that it was. And that was like the young boy moving through in this world of witches and wizards and how they interact.
And you're like the chosen one.
Yeah, and so you had a lot of that goodness, but then like obviously you grow up with the books, and some people kept it, but I just remember feeling, because the later ones came out like when I was a teenager, and realizing that like this boy in like the 6th and 7th books is supposed to be like 16, 17, and he is not acting like a young man whatsoever. And so that really, I finished the series, but those books I read once and never felt the urge to pick them up again. When I was younger, the first 4 I reread many times.
I almost broke them. Yeah.
And that launched into other works of fiction, because it was good for sparking the imagination.
Yes.
I think they were, and I think there were a lot worse books, but it was nowhere near Satanist. If anything, you could say like J.K. Rowling is kind of the peak of the modern worldview intersected with fantasy, because there's no like There's no mention of God or church or anything like that. It's very much the world of secular Britain with magic.
Yeah.
Yes. My
Um,
so I don't mean to speak too harshly of her, but my mother was um she, how do I put this? She was low church Anglo. Her family had moved north post Civil War, and my dad, when I say he was German, from the time they got off the ship until he decided to get a little bit spicy as a young man and marry outside of his race and marry my Anglo mother.
this is the
They were,
story of my family too.
yeah. So so um, she had, for all the good points about her, many of my quibbles about her would be her low church her low church Anglo identity, and so very 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 much Methodist slash, yeah, we'll go with that, slash a little bit of Pentecostal thrown in there. So, oh my lands, Roman mythology, anything that had a whiff of anything other than Christ was no good. And where I'm headed with all this is I think one of the great things that kept me from going down different paths is my dad being deep German. It was Lutheran as far back as anybody could see, and it was like, drink a beer, don't be an ass about it, read the mythology, whatever, have fun. What can it teach you? And so, yeah, whatever. It was an interesting house.
Yeah.
No, I kind of moving into modernity, looking back, I have a little more charity for the crazy church ladies, because
Right.
as much as like none of the indicators were there, they were right about a lot more things than they should have been right about.
Yeah, okay. yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think, like, kind of in your father's view, in the more Christian view, like I take with these, is the view of the universality of Christianity, and how Christianity infuses the culture and doesn't override it, but pulls out the fundamental goodness and kind of diversity in it. Like, some of the best fairy tales I like are some of the Arthurian legends that are clearly, these came about in the Christianization period. Like the interactions of saints and fairies and this confluence of ideas, and you can see in these fantastical elements of people working out this transition in of reconciling these pagan roots with the
Right.
truth of Christianity and coming to that. And I think that that's
What
extremely important in all cultures.
if man is made in the image of God, regardless of how far away he is walking from God, in the things that he produces, there is going to be some sort of echo of that image.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that means that there are times where a different perspective can be helpful to our greater understanding of God. So
Yeah. Going back to Harry Potter, though, I think it's very much of its time.
Yes.
If the kids are ever interested in reading Harry Potter, I will not stop them.
yes,
But we are not doing Harry Potter family movie nights, because I'm fine with that historical moment being over. And I think Rowling's primary contribution to culture actually was the change in attitude around fan fiction and like fan works generally, which has had some really positive and extremely negative also consequences for fiction, like kind of writ large.
Well, because the Harry Potter universe and her very much acceptance and willingness to allow people to kind of dabble in her universe is really what started fan fiction as a thing. Because prior to her, authors would kind of jealously guard their IP, and she let all of these like internet stories and things happen
and encourage them even,
which I think has been kind of a boost to the independent or amateur author, and at the same time the source of just ungodly amounts of smut on the internet.
Yeah, lots of Minotaur porn.
Well, that's I'm thinking not to put too fine a point on it, but you can find a through line from the Harry Potter series into 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh yeah. Well, it's basically Harry Potter to Twilight, young adult,
Yeah,
and
right.
then 50 Shades is fan fiction of Twilight. That's how it started.
Yep.
The thing with FanWorks is that they've also developed into a burgeoning internet based ecosystem of original fiction, though that's a little bit harder to find, which is a lot of what
Okay.
you read.
Now, are we talking about something beyond Tumblr? Or
Yeah, so there's
Okay.
well, so I was on Tumblr back in 2009.
Right.
And so I've kind of watched the progression of fandom develop from I wasn't on the internet before Harry Potter, but before Harry Potter it was basically Star Trek.
Okay.
Was sort of like a big source, and Star Wars. But those also had a lot of like licensed in-universe fictions as well. But yeah, fanfic was always really big for Star Trek.
Okay.
But then with Harry Potter, fanfic got really big, and fanworks in general kind of took over culturally as millennials came of age. And you saw a lot of the shift in animation toward a millennial audience and toward interaction with the fans. So you saw this in stuff like Adventure Time and then also like My Little Pony, where fans were adult fans of kids' properties were starting to have.
Wait, are we moving on to bronies right now?
Well, bronies were a part of that like cultural movement though, or a cultural moment, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it is a really good show. Like, I don't blame people for being fans of My Little Pony. It's incredibly well written. Which is crazy. Like, actually, My Little Pony and Ninjago are probably two of the better
All right.
shows that have come out. But anyway, so you trace that from Harry Potter, but then now you have people who are primarily self-publishing, and not even self-publishing actual physical books, but they're mostly doing it digitally. And you're used to fanfiction.net and Archive of Our Own and all of these fan sites. And then now you also have people who are able to...
Is that APAD or whatever? Is
AO3. A Wattpad is one of the other ones. Wattpad is interesting because it's a lot like Royal Road in that you'll have fan works on there, but you also have a lot of original works, and it's supposed to be kind of a way to monetize serialized original fiction. And I think part of the reason you don't see a lot of men's fiction on the end caps at Barnes & Noble is because there's not really a lot of books at all on the end caps at Barnes & Noble. If you actually go walk around one, which we did a couple weeks ago, or I did a couple weeks ago.
Toys and plushies.
It's toys. It's about like, do you remember the Discovery stores in the mall
Vaguely.
back when we were kids?
Right.
Yeah, it's basically that now with some books interspersed, which is not bad. Like, I like finding educational toys for the kids, but it's not really a bookstore anymore. And that's why you can't find men's fiction there, is because you can't find anybody's fiction there. You can find some in caps with smut. And then also whatever's on the summer reading list for whatever the schools are assigning sometimes.
Okay, sure. Yep.
Yeah. But places like Royal Road or Wattpad or Inkit are trying. Yeah, Inkit's one of the smaller ones, but they are where independent authors are going to get published, because unless you're Brian Sanderson, you're not getting published without an extensive fan base of your existing works online.
Yeah. I know we've talked about it also, like in the age of the internet. So some of those sites are interesting because they're actually, like I've seen, they're actually an import from Japan.
Mhm.
And Japanese writing culture, which is like the origination of the light novel, which is where you get like the ridiculously long titles, is because they would be titles on a message board. So they would slam as much that they think would be interesting in the title because you had hundreds to choose from. But that was in some ways imported over to the US, and I would say elevated for a bit of an older audience, not just like your like teenager. More, I would say, like specifically men in their 20s and 30s, kind of adventure fiction, to where you have amateur authors publishing things and then transitioning to a Patreon model for advanced chapters. Like if you got popular. And so
now, is that a world that you are in? Because I think when you were introduced earlier, there was the potential for you to talk about publishing. And
so I am. So I got onto there as far as like finding novels, because I read a lot of the older stuff, wasn't finding some of the interesting, and then searching for like, man, I'm spending a lot of money on books. Is there anything free available?
Yes.
So I got into like, oh, Royal Road, again, fan of fantasy and all that. These are some interesting kind of in the vein of pulp, where it's just like, this is just entertainment.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yes.
It's not big L literature, but not everything needs to be.
Well, and for me, it's like, instead of some other like watching TV, I'm going to read this thing for an hour and relax on the couch after work and doing other like actual jobs. I think there is not every single thing you do in your life needs to be 100% like building you towards a purpose. Sometimes you can just enjoy yourself and relax and turn off your mind a little bit. But in that world, you do have all of these kind of much more original fictions, some derivative off each other, but really kind of self-published, of just anyone can go on there and publish some chapters. And the ones that take off from their algorithm and rating get big, and you start a Patreon, and some of the authors on there are making something like $15,000 or $20,000 a month on Patreon, which is wild for an author.
Yeah, that's like
yes, yeah. I mean, that's a J.K. Rowling advance.
Yeah.
And the thing is like, it's never actually making it to print. Or they do
generally,
after they clean up.
The pipeline is from Royal Road to Patreon to Popular. It's to Amazon Kindle Unlimited is the pipeline.
And then sometimes they do audiobooks as well.
Yes.
So the only ones from Royal Road that I've really gotten into have been audiobooks that we listen to on long drives. Yeah. They're good. It's very much a male target audience on Royal Road.
And for a lot of it, it very much overlaps with like the con scene and RPGs and things like that. That's one of the big ones, which it is not high L literature. Some definitely like, oh, this author actually has some chops, and you see them develop over time. But it very much is in the vein of entertainment.
Yeah.
But
like getting an old pulp magazine or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is the modern pulp magazine. But surprisingly, and I was commenting on it from the male side, surprisingly stayed in contrast to what's popular in women's fiction. Like I have yet to have one that had any sort of, I would say, eroticism in any of the popular ones. Like
especially
there's romance,
surprise eroticism.
Anything like that is I think a deliberate effort in that community to avoid. And so it's even in contrast to Japanese light novels. But I think like to where there's always the contrast, like where have all the male authors gone? And I'm like, they're all on Patreon making money from several hundred followers, and that's it. That's where they're at. And they maybe some will break through, but also in that vein of the internet, I think we have become so siloed and fractured as a society because of the internet. It's very difficult to have any sort of work of literature that's unifying.
Because like there can be people who are making $20K a month, and I couldn't even tell you the names of these guys. And I read,
Couldn't tell you, but I mean they're
Well,
popular.
and so
They have,
I think about my own reading habits right now, and what there's so many things that's already been published in the 20th century
Mhm.
that I still want to get through. I mean, right now I'm reading The Never-Ending Story, and then I've got a stack of other books that I think. Well, where I'm ultimately headed is I feel like the only new books that I'm reading are things that are being published inside the reactionary right or whatever, and that's not even because I know these guys literary chops, but it's because I have an idea of certain things they believe and what they're trying to achieve, and so I'm willing to give them a shot, and see what's going on, when Slaughter's writing his new book, or if Sandbach ever publishes poetry, or well, there's a fair bit of nonfiction in there, but
yeah. I'm working my way through the Hugo Awards actually, and I know there were some
yes.
drama about that a couple years back about
With
the
Fox Day.
yeah, but I'm starting back in the 50s and I've been working my way through. I'm in like 1963 right now. Anyway, I
Did
get
you
to
make
reread.
it yet to I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream?
I have not. I am on
I need
currently
to read
Starship
that one.
Troopers and I'm extremely excited to reread it. So
Okay, so you have read it before then.
I have read it before. I'm just going to
Yes.
read it again because I know I like the book. I don't know that I will reread all of the books I come across that I've read before.
Right.
But that one definitely deserves a reread. But yeah, so it's been really interesting. Sci-fi's always been kind of pulpy. And there have been some greats in it, but I don't know that it really took itself that seriously as fiction. I know there's it has a reputation for sci-fi fans being kind of snobby compared to fantasy
Sure.
fans.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
that might actually be a product of the like publication model for fantasy becoming very formulaic in the 70s after
Well, I
that
was going to
big
say
Tolkien.
urbane.
Well, it was like very intentionally
Yeah.
Well, and I think
formulaic.
I think with
Mhm.
sci-fi too, it also gets that it purports to be kind of on the cutting edge of ideas and technology and these things,
Yep.
versus fantasy is always associated with, oh, this is children's fairy tales.
Yeah.
This isn't
Yes.
something for adults. And I mean, like going back to the Tolkien thing that people struggle, like some people don't want to take Tolkien seriously as like true literature, even though he clearly is, and anyone who thinks he's not is wrong.
So
And
I agree with you on that, but I do have a critique of Tolkien, but it's not really a fair critique of him. What it is that I see Tolkien as a bridge. He was a transition author from the saga into the heavy narrative, which is that's almost exclusively what we have now. And when I say narrative, I mean the
Modern,
personal
yeah.
narrative. The focus on the character more so than the story, and it's the words I'm using. It's almost subtle or confusing, but the best way is to look at something like the Iliad,
Mhm.
and you look at how Achilles would act, and we saw different things that were the impetus for his actions, and we knew that farts. Who was it that died, and then he's having his moment. Dadgummit, Hector killed him.
Menelaus?
Uh,
No, that's Odysseus' son. Telemachus?
It's fine.
No, that's Odysseus'
Oh,
son.
damn it.
It's fine. So,
Yeah.
anyways, so we see him out there, and we see how he's affected, but there was still this otherworldly nature to the heroes of old, and even Hector. It's one of the things I dislike. There's almost this junior high attitude of, well, Hector's the real hero. It's like, no, you're missing the point of what the hero was. The hero was other than. And so both Hector and Achilles can operate in that framework of the heroic at that point, because it's not primarily a moral question. So Tolkien gets here and he has his guys, and the only one from the lower class is Samwise Gamgee.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else is at the very least landed, if not aristocracy, in monarchy. And so these guys are going out. They are heroic. That is their station, and they're operating. But he did start developing, especially with Aragorn, some of these questions of what's going on, what is the narrative I'm taking part in, and then with Frodo, it is the chosen one, which ultimately became the only thing that people ever wrote about, especially within fantasy, is I'm the chosen one. I'm the chosen one. I'm the chosen one. And here's my narrative, and here's my existential issues, and here's my struggle. It's like I want to know you're struggling because you went through, you went and did the damn thing. Like I don't care about. I'm not saying that I'm looking for pulp, but what I'm saying is there is this intense amount of navel gazing that
Well,
that
I think you're
started coming
right.
forward.
He's the bridge from the externalized story to the internalized. That
Yeah, and from that which was ideal, because that was another part of what was going on with heroes, was that they were the ideal. And so you weren't the chosen one, you were chasing after that which was ideal.
What I would disagree with you, because for the
Okay.
Greek heroes, they were the chosen ones. They were chosen by the gods. They had the lineage. They were nobles. They were special, and that's where Tolkien's hero is very much bringing that kind of North mythological into the Christian world. And what is the Christian hero without being overtly? And that's where the hero in Tolkien's world is Samwise Gamgee.
Well, you also have
Nope.
to look at
Okay. So we are in totally different playing
Okay.
fields now.
Anyway, you should you should read and or listen to Tolkien's translation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I actually really
Yeah.
enjoy it. And it's kind of got those same.
I want to do that as well as Beowulf.
Yeah, Beowulf is really good too. I love Sir Gawain, and it doesn't get as much love as it should. So I always just plug that.
Fair
I think
enough.
I'm actually fading fast.
Okay, absolutely.
So I'm probably gonna have to bow out here, unless you guys have any other questions.
This was
We'll have to do it
huge.
again.
I would love if you're down for it, I would love 5 minutes to just do it back and forth on Samwise Gamgee, because I think it is this is one of these stupid hobby horses I have that I think for some reason it got lost in translation.
What? So what? Samwise is the hero of the story. He's the one.
He's not. No, he's not.
Who do you think is the hero?
They all are.
Well, I will agree with you. So I would say the story is not about Samwise. All the characters in Tolkien
are
heroic and amplify different aspects of heroism in their own way. But there is definitely the aspect informed by the Christian worldview that it's not just the king that's heroic, that there is this intrinsic nobility that you can instantiate as the common person.
And here's why I would go with that, is that their hierarchy and the great chain of being is what we are supposed to be participating in. And frankly, we can't participate in life other than some form of hierarchy.
Yeah.
And so the reason that Sam was able to deal with Cirith Ungol and help Frodo get through certain situations is because he was already participating in that hierarchy as a gardener. He wasn't looking to take these things on to himself, but in participating in life in his appropriate station, that is what enabled him to go on and be in there. And that's where, when Tolkien says in his letter that Samwise is the chief hero among them, what I tell people is, he's not saying that Sam is the greatest hero or that he is the sole hero, but that because he is the most base of the individuals involved in the fellowship, that is why we see he was the least heroic of the group by station, but acts in the same manner as they do as a hero. Did that make sense?
Yes. And I think like in that, and also he most fulfills his station and embraces it throughout. As far as like he never strives to be more than he is.
Yes.
Not in a way that's deprecating, but in that he recognizes his proper
He's not
place in
Aragorn.
the world.
He's not the
and
king.
That,
yes.
And that him being the best that he can be at that is his heroic purpose.
Yes.
So I think we're a lot closer now than you initially thought. But yes. And I think that's a great thing of Tolkien to kind of bring in that not everyone has to be Achilles. That
Yes.
there are these varying levels, and that's very much kind of the universality of Christianity at play. But it isn't just the one, like, oh, he's the hero, everyone else is supporting character.
Yeah.
They all have their own. But yeah, I'm more in line with what you're saying.
Yeah. But this is so, I appreciate that. Yeah, because the amount of times I have to go back and forth with, well, I don't have to, but I'm stupid enough to do it. to go back and forth with people online, and they're like, Sam's the hero, and it's like, no, he's a hero in a group of heroes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you have all these different types and instantiations of hero. I would say Tolkien's a little more complex than, say, Lewis, where Lewis kind of beats you over the head with the allegory in his series. But,
a great point of contention between the two of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Though
I
have to admit, the first time I read Lord of the Rings, I skipped from Bree all the way to Rivendell.
Oh.
But that is one of those where I remember reading it, and I was in the 5th grade, and I did not care about his description of the forest. But coming back as an adult, I'm like, oh no, this has so much more depth now. That description. But yeah, because I'm like, who's Tom Bombadil? I just skipped that part.
Well, no, that is fair though. That is fair that this, because he, from a literary standpoint, it almost makes no sense.
Well, no, because that's clearly Tolkien just wanting to inhabit his world.
Oh, I don't.
I'll
let you have it.
As every adaptation has shown, that sequence is completely unnecessary to understanding the rest of the story. It adds depth. I won't dispute that.
Read the Silmarillion, I'm not going to read the Silmarillion.
Why wouldn't you read the Silmarillion? Because I almost went there, but I wasn't going to. But then you brought it up.
I've read the first 20 pages of the Silmarillion 10 times. I'm not going to read any of the Silmarillion.
Oh, it's so the creation narrative in the Silmarillion is one of the most beautiful things I've ever read.
Well, yeah, that's the only part of the Silmarillion I've read a bunch of times, because I'm not going to get.
But then you go into Fingolfin, and
I don't. I'm not interested in fantasy Genesis. I'm sorry.
It's one. We're really on Tolkien right now. It's interesting. It's interesting how dark he gets in the Silmarillion. I think Baron and Luthien is honestly one of his darkest stories. And then the Children of Turin is just, the Children of Hurin with Turnbar and all that. Like it just, that's bleak. That is
Yeah.
bleak. But having said all that, hey, this was fantastic, and I greatly appreciate you guys coming on and talking
Yeah,
tonight.
anytime. This was really fun.
So where can people find you guys? What do some shilling.
Oh, yeah. So I am Juniper. I am at a Desert Dryad on basically all social media, Twitter, especially X. So yeah, just shoot me a DM or whatever. I am currently working on a serial pulp sci-fi zine about marsupials in space.
Oh, we didn't even get into graphic novels, and if they should.
Oh shoot. Okay, well we'll have to talk about those a different time because those are getting really popular. Kind of taking the place of young boys fiction now. But anyway,
Okay.
we'll talk about that another time because that is
That'd be
actually
fine.
something that my family has been kind of into. So,
Okay.
yeah, hopefully we can talk about that some other time. So, yeah, and that's kind of me. And I'm working on a zine. So if you want to support that, links in my bio. But yeah,
Yep.
and then my dear husband. If you want to talk to him, you can also DM me, and I promise not to look at it. I'll just get it to him.
Yes, because he is in real life personality.
Yeah, he's in. Well, we're not out as a married couple on the internet, so
Yes, fair.
yeah. So plausible deniability as to if he is or is not on Twitter, also. So
Fair enough.
skulking my page.
No.
No.
Well,
No.
very very good, guys. So you will find some of her links in the description. I imagine you have more links out there that I don't have in the description, but certainly your biggest ones, your X and then your NeoCities is up there.
Yep.
And
Everything's
this
on
was
there,
a great
so.
conversation.
I had a great time. Thanks again.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let's see. On my end, guys, you'll find links in the description. I have something regarding Shakespeare that is going to be under review this week that will hopefully be published, not by myself, but by somebody else, and then we'll see how that goes. So that's me. You can follow me at Wander Mr. Panda, and you guys have a good evening.
Night. Bye.